Hello there guys, and welcome to Mad Doc Minis. In this video I'm going to be restoring my own original Mark III Land Raider, which I got way back when it was first released as a kit back in whatever it was, 1999 or something like that. So this particular tank is 23 years old at the time of making this video. It's been lying around in a box for years and years. If you weren't there in the hobby when this thing was first released, wow, it is difficult to put into words what a significant moment it was, because it was a massive leap forward in terms of quality, in terms of the design, the aesthetic, the size of it, everything about it just blew the scene away, and everyone wanted one. Even non-Space Marine players kind of were after this thing. So yeah, I mean, they're everywhere now, so it doesn't have the same kind of appeal, I guess, but at the time, wow, it was the new hotness. So I'm going to give this thing a bit of a reworking. I'm going to do something different with the sponsons, one of which doesn't work properly, probably where I put it together badly when I was younger. And I'm going to give it a basic paint job as well to get it back on the tabletop with my regular Space Marine army. So here we go. We're going to do a little bit of paint stripping first. In this area where the chapter symbol normally goes, there's several layers of crudded up paint, and that's going to spoil any kind of overcoat we do. So I'm just going to get some rubbing alcohol, or sometimes it's called surgical spirit. I'm going to rub that over the area with a toothbrush and just strip the paint back a little bit, and that will allow me to do that without damaging the underlying plastic. So don't use acetone, of course, on plastic models, because that'll just eat the plastic away. You need something like alcohol to do the job, really. A little bit of rubbing, a little bit of scraping with a sharp knife as well to get some of the more stubborn bits off. But that's going to smooth that particular area out nicely. Not going to strip anywhere else because everywhere else is fairly smooth. I'm going to re-drill the heavy bolter barrels at this stage as well, because I did a really bad job of them when I first built the tank. So that's nice and satisfying to get that a bit better. And the smoke launchers, they're going to come off. I'm not actually going to replace those. They just broke over the years, like with this thing rattling around inside the box. So off they come. Little bit of tidy up afterwards. And the scroll on the door, on the kind of hatch at the front, that's pretty good. I did quite a good job on that, even if I do say so myself as a 14-year-old, or whatever I was at the time. So that's coming off for reattachment later on. So we're going to prime this thing now, or I guess overcoat it, with some standard Mechanicus grey, which is my homebrew chapter colour. And that's going all the way over the tank in a bit of a light coating. And then that's going to be ready for some modifications. The first thing that I'm going to do is actually break off the sponsons, and I can do this because I've only ever used super glue for all of my Warhammer models. Never really been a fan of plastic cement. I know it has its merits, but I'm never converting, guys, so don't try. Yeah, so they'll come off quite easily with some strategic prying, and I'm going to just rework them because I've never really been happy with the design as intended with these sponsons. I don't like the guns sitting side by side. I think they just add too much width to the tank. The whole thing looks too wide, and I want to make it look, for want of a better word, a bit sleeker. A sleek looking Land Raider. I don't know if that's a bit of a contradiction in terms, but you know what I mean. So I carefully break these things down to their constituent parts, and I'm sort of being a bit careful not to kind of ruin the components when I'm doing this, because most of it's going to be maintained, and I want to make sure we can maintain the idea of rotation as well. We're not going to be able to get the guns to pivot up and down with what I've got in mind, but I do want them to be able to rotate, so I'm a little bit careful with this, just breaking it down bit by bit, and they do come apart quite nicely in the end. And what my intention is to just kind of have the cannons stacked one above the other, so they're kind of in the other way, one above the other rather than side by side. And I think that's going to just sort out this problem with the aesthetic that I've got. So I go ahead and saw the las cannons down a little bit. I kind of saw the back end off of them, and I'm doing that in real time just to show that it doesn't take long using a hobby saw. And this part of the video is a little bit more comprehensive in the amount of footage I've kept in, and that's just in case anybody wants to copy any aspects of what I do. So bear with me on this, guys, but we need to do that for all four las cannons, obviously, and the under kind of carriage, the kind of like little, I don't know, the cables that come underneath the cannon, they need to come off as well, because of course we're going to do this thing about stacking them one on top of the other. So once again, hobby saw those off, those predetermined spots there. and we're kind of getting ready for a final tidy up in order to glue them together. There are some little nubs right on top of the cannon, some little sticky out bits that need to come off, and the easiest way to take those off is with a pair of hobby snips. So they're just going to come off so that we can create a more snug fit when we glue the cannons together, and they go together really nicely just with a bit of super glue. It's advisable to take a little bit of care when you're gluing the cannons together, because if they're not straight and in line with each other, it is a little bit of an eye-catching thing, I think. So it will get picked up on if it's not right. So do take some care, take some time, get it right, move them around, tweak it a little bit until you're happy with it. Once that's done, they just get glued straight on to the rotation assembly and the sponson onto the nice flat surface that's left over here. And I do take a little bit of note of how and where I'm gluing that, because of course I want to replicate this on the other side in a minute as well. So just take note as you're doing it, kind of how you're doing it, so you can make the other side as similar as possible. A little bit of a dry fit here. There's nothing's glued onto the side of the tank yet. We're just making sure that everything's looking nice and in proportion, and making sure that it's matching, you know, my vision, if you will. Everything's looking good at this stage, so we're going to move on to the other sponson and just glue those cannons on to the other side in exactly the same way, taking care to replicate the process as closely as I can. Once that's done, I do actually use a little bit of EPVC, which is a kind of sign making material. It's more expensive but better than foam board, in my opinion anyway, or at least for most projects. I think it's better than foam board. Foam board's better for some things. It's hard to cut, so be careful. Lots of small shallow cuts. I just cut out a shape and then replicate that 4 times using the first shape as a template. And that's going to be a nice thick armoured plate that's going to cover up all the horrible conversion work on the sides of the cannons and that, where they've been kind of glued on. A simple but effective way of kind of hiding a simple hack job, basically. Super glue does the trick. A little bit of a trim down of any components underneath, just to make sure that everything sits nice and flat. Just use the hobby snips to snip bits off there that need to come off. And that's it. That's all there is to that bit, really. We're actually going to do a final check, make sure no glue has seeped into any of the kind of rotation, the moving parts and anything like that. It's all looking good. So we are actually ready to glue those back onto the tank. And you need to make sure that you glue the kind of sponson onto the side that it came off of, because that's going to be a better fit. If you've done what I've done and kind of pried them off, you know, if you're making the tank from scratch, then, you know, not an issue at all. These little Terminator tilt shields, I use these to hide a little bit of scarring from I don't know, I'd kind of like cut off the skulls above the deployment hatch as a kid. I don't know why I did that, but it left some scarring. So these are going to cover that up. They're the right size, they've got Terminator iconography on them. They do the job nice and easily. So a blob of super glue, jobs are good in there, sorted. So getting a little bit of paint down on the model now. I don't cover this in full detail because this is definitely not a painting tutorial and I'm not that good. I'm just showing you what I do. A little bit of lead belcher on the functional parts of the tank, the tracks and the weapons. A little bit of Mephiston red as the accent colour for my homebrew chapter. So that gets a few thin coats on some selected panels. Just breaks things up a bit, adds a bit of colour, which is nice. Get a bit of a go faster stripe on the deployment hatch, which is cool. Thin pencil lines has helped me get straight lines on that. The scarring you can see under the Aquila is going to get covered up in a minute when I put the scroll back on the door. I also kind of put a little bit of granite steel on of a lot of the iconography, just to differentiate it from the more functional parts of the tank. So, you know, add a little bit of bling, if you will, to those areas. The scroll gets attached now, and a little bit of care taken to get that nice and straight. Another eye-catching thing, so details kind of matter. A little bit of Avalon Sunset on the headlights as well. I do cover some other little bits and pieces with the painting, which I'll try and pick up on when we do some of the kind of the final shots in a minute. The transfers go on. I just use upside down Ultramarines transfers for my homebrew chapter, which gives me an Omega symbol. I do that out of practicality because, of course, you get ultramarine symbols in everything, so there's a ready supply of them. Use a little bit of micro set on the model first just to get a nice adhesion of the transfer. I don't actually dull it down with matte, varnish or anything afterwards, because I tend to use, as you'll see in a minute, a hell of a load of Null oil over my miniatures, like, loads and loads of it. Really, really heavy washes, just the way I like to paint, lazy basically. But that kind of dulls it all down to a matte finish anyway. But if you don't paint like that, which is probably a really, really good thing, then obviously you need to use a little bit of matte medium over the top as well. I do apply some more transfers than I show on the screen here. Put some Aquillas on the sides of the kind of sponsons, as you'll see in the final footage. So there's a little bit more that happens off screen, but it's all the same stuff. What I would say is get your transfers nice and straight. I'm a bit of a stickler for that sort of thing because they are eye-catching, and for me they're an important distraction away from a really mediocre paint job, and I'm not just saying that is the reality for me. So I like to really get my transfers down nicely, get them looking good and nice and straight. Otherwise it's just going to look crap basically. So take your time with transfers, get them right. Big bonus point, especially if you're not that great a painter. What we do as well, as I said earlier on, I kind of cover this thing in Null oil, really heavy wash. This is going to make some of you cringe. I don't care, it's the way I like to paint. It's a cheat, and I like the way it weathers the tank, runs into all the recesses. It's quick, it's down, it's dirty, but I like it. If I had a vat of it, I just lower the tank in there and kind of pluck it out basically. You might want to use a cheaper wash if you're doing it like this rather than Null oil. But this is the finished article. You can see a few changes. I've added a little bit more red towards the back end of the tank to sort of balance things out a little bit. You can see the extra transfer on the side of the sponson there as well. You might notice on some of the closer up shots as well that some of the vision slits have been painted like a green colour and kind of simply highlighted. The driver's had a bit of a paint job as well. So I'm going to shut up soon, but I'm going to ask you to like, share and subscribe if you've enjoyed the content. Thank you to all my existing subscribers. Growing slowly and steadily. Really appreciate all your support, guys. Leave me some comments. Let me know what you think of it. I really love reading all your comments, and I will see you in a future video. Cheers.